soon the night sky was full of twinkling stars, and I was able to impress everyone with my navigation skills. The software was state-of-the-art, but I remember Heather telling me how the ancients had used the stars in much the same way. It always made me smile, thinking about the names she gave the constellations. It was the middle of the night by the time we got back, but Mrs. Silton was still up waiting for us. "Really, again, in the same place," was all she said as she shook her head and tended to Mr. Silton's second bullet wound. Mr. Preston nearly knocked us over as he sprinted towards the bathroom. It appeared that his body had kept on making urine, even though it didn't have anywhere left to store it. I asked Mr. Silton about Heather and the old lady, but he said he was just about to wash his hair. When I asked him again later, he said the main thing was that we'd got Logan and the van back, and couldn't the rest wait until I had cleaned up the band room for him. I didn't know what to say. Everything we had done, everything I had helped him with, I thought it was all to get everyone back together. But now I didn't know what to think. Before I could say anything, Mrs. Silton explained that it was okay if I only travelled on trains and was alone. I must have looked worried as Mrs. Silton smiled and continued, "If you really want these idiots to go with you, they can disguise themselves and catch the next train after you." Mr. Silton was dismissive, and said I'd get nowhere without proper ID. "They'll be stopping robots for even the tiniest of things," he said. "And a robot passport costs a fortune these days." "Well," said Mrs. Silton, "it's a good job I've got this." Mr. Silton looked confused and asked where Mrs. Silton got the money. "Sometimes," said Mrs. Silton, "when God slams a door in your face and shoots you twice in the shoulder, he opens a window." Mrs. Silton explained how Preston had given her the extra money. He said there was good money to be made selling pills and powder to people that distracted them from the world being an absolute mess. "Bedtime," said Mr. Logan as he carried his guitar into his room. Everyone else left one by one, leaving me stroking the dog. I awoke to the sound of Mrs. Silton making herself some breakfast. It felt very early, but I suppose it was just that we had gotten so late. Mrs. Silton gulped down her coffee, and with a reassuring smile she said, "Let's do this." The pedestrian tunnel was far longer than I expected, but it was nice. It gave me a chance to chat with Mrs. Silton. She told me she was from an upper-class family, and that her parents had nearly disowned her when she married Mr. Silton. But she said she really was happy being with her husband. And after all, as she put it, he did provide for her in this messed-up world. However, I couldn't help but laugh when she said how much she liked Mr. Silton's band. I steered the conversation onto the topic of the war. She explained she had been a nurse near some major combat, but she looked really sad, so I changed the subject. I asked her if the town was nice. Mrs. Silton smiled, and described it as a wretched hive of scum and villainy. Train tickets cost $1,000, so Mrs. Silton said I should trade in some of the things I'd cleaned so I could afford to travel. However, when we tried the door, it was apparent that the junkyard owner wouldn't be back for a while. So Mrs. Silton suggested I try to earn some money by other means. She said there were plenty of jobs in the town that a robot could do. Suddenly, as if by magic, the shopkeeper appeared. "Hello, sir," he said. "If there's something that catches your eye, just pick it up and bring it over to me." The foreman explained the job to me. I would be making bricks. The world needed rebuilding and these bricks would more than help. He said I would be on the end of the production line and would be shaping the final part of the bricks. All I had to do was hit the brick in time with everyone else,